Yes.
Bye.
There we go.
Yeah.
See ourselves, right? Okay, there we go. Yeah.
Yeah, it's.
Good evening and welcome to the Thursday, November 24th, 2024 joint workshop between the Scarborough Board of Education and the Town Council. We're going to just really quickly call the attendance for the school board. So Ray, would you mind?
Mr. Kelleher,
Here.
Ms. Leon, Ms. Lindstrom,
She's not here. Here.
Ms. Peterson,
Here.
Mr. Rockenstein,
Here.
Ms. Turpinian,
Here.
Ms. Trapani Huff,
Here.
Ms. Ledger,
Here.
Ms. Ruskina.
All right. Thank you so much. Would everyone please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have a lot of new faces, so I thought really quickly, if we could go around and introduce ourselves. We have some new counselors and we have a new school board member as well, and our student reps are joining us, and then Harriman is here as well. So if we just want to quickly go around, I'll start. I'm Shannon. Shannon Lindstrom. I'm the school board chair.
I'm Diane Netto, I'm the superintendent.
Ray Grogan, Assistant Superintendent.
I'm April Seither. I am the town council chair.
Corey Fellows, new town council member.
Karen Shoup, town council.
Mark Lee, CEO of Harriman.
Julian Trapani Huff, school board.
John Kelleher, School Board.
John Anderson, Town Council.
Bill Donovan, Town Council.
Charlie Peters, I'm the chair of the SBAC.
Larry Kane, the vice chair of SBAC.
John Cushing, Town Council.
Grace Ledger, senior student rep for the school board.
Abby Ruskina, student rep for school board.
I'm Freela Tarpinian. I'm on the school board.
Mitchell Rockenstar, I'm on the school board.
Alyssa Peterson, I'm on the school board.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Our agenda item 4.0 is new business and 4.1 is the school building advisory committee phase 2 update. So for this, I'll turn it over to you, Charlie.
Thanks. So I'll just point your attention to the screens. I'll run through some slides to kind of tell you where we're at with SBAC 2. I thought with so many new members, we'd start with kind of where we've been, how we got here, where we're at, and where we're going. Next slide, please. So just as a quick review, and I know many of you have probably seen the work we did in SBAC 1, but we'll go through that quickly. So phase 1 was in the spring, and we went through, I don't remember how long it was, almost 6 months worth of work to kind of see what we could come up with. The charge of that was to try to present a single solution that we thought the voters would get behind. Through the course of that work, without having, professional consultants to help us with it, we realized we really just didn't have the data. And so the recommendation from that group was to take these 4 options forward into phase 2, use the help of a consultant to deep dive into these and maybe present other options that might help us get to a solution that the voters can get behind. So I'll just take a second and go through these 4 options just to refresh everybody on what they are. Next slide, please. So concept 1 was to add a 4th primary school. This slide here just kind of walks you through, I won't dive into the details on this, but really helps understand what the capacity issues and how a 4th primary school would help alleviate that. Along with, some of the costs there. For apples to apples comparison, we came up with a model, construction costs, and we looked at, we made some adjustments to enrollment projections and then used those baseline figures in all 4 options so that we could really kind of dive into whether or not one option solved for some of those issues better than another one. Next slide. So, we looked at, even went in and looked at some locations of where might a 4th school be. There's we looked at, potentially putting it out west of the interstate. Obviously, there's some infrastructure challenges there. So those are all things that we're looking for a consultant to help us with site selection. some of the benefits of the fourth primary school, right? The community has said they like the neighborhood schools, the small schools. This preserves that. It allows us to replace portables and then add the security. So there would be some renovations to the 3 existing schools in addition to the construction of a 4th school. Slide. I won't go into all of these benefits. It's a word chart, but it does kind of, this, we'll leave this in there so you guys can review, but these are some of the benefits of that 4-school model. Next slide. Option 2 is really a novel concept that I have to give credit to Sue, who came up with this. I don't think we've looked, the board had looked at this previously, but a small consolidated school that just supported grades 2 and 3 would help reduce the cost of what the larger consolidated school would need to be. And so this, in looking at this, you know, we looked at the enrollment and are we in a COVID bubble? This kind of challenges the idea of where our enrollment projections looked at, that we could be in a COVID bubble still, that maybe we don't need such a large school. So this was an alternative solution that we really wanted to vet out in phase 2. Slide. So this is basically, there'd be rephasing of the schools. So this chart shows how that might happen. So all of the you'd pull 2nd grade out of the primaries and then pull 3rd out of Wentworth to have 1 2-grade school. So you'd have different phasing levels. You'd actually add a phase change to the student's current phasing. Slide. Again, some of the benefits here, I won't go through all of them. There's some pretty obvious benefits, but also, you know, reasons that this may or may not work. So we'll leave that there as a for future reference. Next slide. And the third concept is really extensive renovations. So we're not adding any new schools. We're just, this would just be renovations of the 3 primaries and the middle school to deal with the overcrowding. Slide. So here's some stats on, you know, classroom sizes, footprint that would be needed. These are all based on our estimations. We took a lot of the work that Harriman did in phase 1. We used some of those projections to help us kind of understand what would need to happen. The facilities director from the schools helped us understand what's in the realm of possible with reference to renovations. Obviously, there's a lot of challenges. So you can't build up. So you have to build out and then up to get some of the square footages. So, you know, understanding what's possible in those lots is another thing that we just couldn't really do without soil samples and some of the geotech stuff that we would need. So next slide. This shows the matrix that we use to kind of assess, you know, if these weren't the only 4 options that we looked at, but these, you know, in order for us to kind of make the recommendation, it needed to solve for these things. All of them did get yeses on all of them, but this shows kind of where this option landed on the matrix. Next slide. And then the 4th option was the K through 3 primary school. So this is another, really, as we looked at this and we thought, well, if you control for cost based on, you know, the assessments that we did, when you do the apples to apples, the cost of the K through 3 school actually was very right in line with the other 3 options. And so we just couldn't in good faith eliminate that, even though it went through referendum. But most of the feedback we got from the surveys was it failed due to cost. There's lots of other reasons that people voted it down, but cost was the primary of that. And so when we put the same cost projections, the same construction cost to this option as you put to the other ones, it fell right in line with the other ones. And so we just thought, let's not eliminate anything as an option yet without opening it up for a vendor to help us go through and vet out all potential options for what the community might be able to get behind. So that's why we kept this one in. It does include renovations to the middle school also to deal with the 6th grade overpopulation. Slide. This was one that, you know, we talked a lot about what's different about this compared to what was in the referendum. And one of the members came up, they actually found this design for a school that's in Europe that tries to maintain the small neighborhood feel that so many people gave us feedback that they wanted through a wing structure, and kids would get assigned to a wing in kindergarten and they'd stay in that wing and have their wing as their community school within the larger school. So that was that concept. Location is obviously, will be a challenge, finding sites. And so that's again where we need consulting to help us with site selection on an option like this. Slide. And again, here's just the evaluation matrix to show that it does, other than the maintaining the neighborhood school as they're currently constructed, it met all of the objectives. Slide. So that's those are the 4 options that we're looking at in phase 2, although open to modifications to those, open to something completely new and different that somebody comes up with, or through the research and study that we do, if something floats to the top, right? But those are the 4 options that we came forward. So where are we now? So we've had 2 meetings with the current committee. The first meeting was really about electing Larry and I into our positions, and then moving forward with the selection, an RFQ process for a vendor. And Diane led that. So I'm going to let her just kind of introduce the RFQ process, and then I'll talk about the selection.
Sure. So again, in our efforts to be really thorough about engaging a firm to work with, we followed a very standard process. We posted an RFQ on September 30th. That's a request for qualifications. I did link it in here so that if you're interested in looking at what that looked like, and all of this information that you see tonight, we will share with you. If you don't yet have it, we'll make that publicly available on our website tomorrow as well. So we posted that RFQ on September 30th. It had really clear objectives and asks in terms of here's what we're looking for. And we really wanted to know, what firms might be able to do to meet those things for us. The deadline for those RFQs, again, those were posted in standard places in the state of Maine, like that happens traditionally. The due date for those was October 18th. On October 18th, the team felt that we didn't have enough interest yet from firms, and was there another way that we might be able to tap into that? And so I was requested to go back out and do a specific reach out to 6 firms who had previously applied in 2019, the last time that the district had done an RFQ. And so I made specific reach out to those firms. We extended the deadline for RFQs until October 31st. And October 31st, we had received a total of 2 applications. And so at that time, we decided this is, clearly where interest lies. We know that there are a lot of districts that are in the same position as us, and a lot of firms working with a lot of districts. And so that, that presents a capacity issue. And so we decided to move forward, and we interviewed both of those 2 firms. Our interview process was quite robust. That was with 10 members from the SBAC group. And so at our first seated meeting with SBAC, we asked folks who might be interested in serving on the subcommittee, really critical decision for our district and our community. And so we had 10 members that served in that process. They were asked to carefully review and rank those 2 written proposals in advance. Not a small task. Each proposal was probably in the scope of 100 pages because they, again, were supposed to really be detailed and answer those 15 priorities that we had spelled out. At the interviews themselves, each firm was given an opportunity to give a presentation to the group. Again, they were given a very specific presentation prompt because our group is, very focused on what are the elements of priority for this work. And so each firm gave a presentation followed by a list of questions that our team had established that again, really aligned with the priorities that we have for this work in the community, that really called into attention what were the pieces of feedback that we had also received from the community about some of the challenges of the failed referendum. And so part of those interview questions included things like milestones, programming, what creative problem solving ideas might they bring to the table, because we know that we want to think really differently about this project. We talked a lot about financial constraints and the need for value engineering. And then communication and community involvement is a huge piece for us in Scarborough. We want to make sure that a project that we are putting forward at this next round is one that we feel really strongly that the community can support. So that was our process.
Stan, slide. So the recommendation from that selection committee was to go with Harriman. That was a unanimous vote of the subcommittee. I'll go through the notes on the slide, but I just want to. We met on Monday. We heard from the selection committee kind of what their thoughts were, and just some of the key words that I wrote down in my notes was their takeaway from the interviews with Harriman was partnership was the biggest one, right? I heard that over and over again from all of the members was they really view this as a partnership with the committee and with the community. Collaboration, community involvement and engagement was really talked about a lot by, that just came across in their presentation to our subcommittee. And then more capacity to self-perform. So I know, in the first, that was a challenge in the first project with Harriman that they had to outsource some of the civil work and some different things. They have that capacity now to take that on. So we think, so it's not going to, we're not just doing a rinse and repeat of the first project. This will be a completely fresh start. The other, everybody kind of unanimously said the paper proposals, forget about the presentation, the interview, but the paper proposals were very clear. Not that the other one was bad, but the Harriman one very quickly floated to the top in its depth, and it addressed all of the priorities in the RFQ that we put forward. It was specific, and in the interviews, I know that a few of our subcommittee members really pressed hard on some of the shortcomings of the first project, and how will it be received? A failed referendum that was kind of led. They were our consultants in that one, bringing them back this time, and really didn't shy away from that. I wasn't for the record, I wasn't on the committee, so I'm just speaking to the notes that I had. But Harriman didn't shy away from that. They talked about that and how they will engage the community differently and what the difference is. And the key difference was, they were tasked to do a consolidated school previously. This project isn't that. This project is, right, the task is let's find the right solution, whether that's a consolidated school, a fourth school, one of these four options, right, or something totally new. And so we're coming at this very differently with Harriman, and they were excited. They certainly expressed an excitement to look at this differently in a fresh light. So the budget concerns were addressed. And then I do want to just take a minute and talk about, the outreach with the community. So when they presented to us on Monday, things that they talked about was how they were going to do this, surveys. I don't want to call it public affairs, but essentially it's public affairs, right? They have people committed to helping us make sure that we understand that we're communicating to the community and not just talking to the community, but getting that feedback from them also, so we can incorporate that feedback into the decisions we make and the work we do going forward. So that's our recommendation is to contract Harriman to help us through this process. Next slide. So where do we go next with Harriman? Slide. So some, why Harriman, right? What do they have that they're going to bring to this project, right? Tools to engage the community. We talked about surveys and some of their other outreach efforts. Their understanding of our district. They worked on the Wentworth project and they've done other projects with the district here. They understand what locally funded projects do and the challenges with those. And so we thought that was important. They walked us through some of their financial modeling, and I think the next slide will show some of that. And then I thought it was a good exercise. I'll publicly say thank you for that, of going through and just ranking priorities. And they did it with the selection committee, then they did it again with us on Monday night. What are your priorities within this project? You know, and the graph there just kind of shows that, right? Making sure that we have an economically responsible solution floated to the top within that small sample size. It may be different when we survey the community, but understanding what the community values and the community priorities are is important, and they clearly have a way to help us with that. Slide. So strategies for long-term planning, right? Looking at, you know, alternatives analysis. They talked a lot on Monday about, you know, life cycle planning and long-term operating cost modeling and things like that, making sure that the solution that we come up with isn't short-sighted, but solves this for you know, future generations in Scarborough. Slide. So this is the last slide, just to kind of talk about what's next, what our proposed timeline will look like. And obviously this is very rough. This is just kind of milestones, but right now we're obviously at the far left of that in data collection. And you notice the input arrows up and down from the community, from these two bodies in the room today, as we move forward. And so we'll start with data collection, obviously lots of fact finding to get us started. As we move into evaluating, taking those data points and then evaluating them against the options, whittling it down to a preferred option or two, and then ultimately choosing one supported option that we'd go forward with and present to you guys for to take forward to referendum. A lot to do in a short amount of time.
But we have an amazing committee of really dedicated citizens. I just can't speak enough about the community engagement and the folks that are participating. We had over 60 people regularly participate in SBAC 1 to come up with the 4 options that you you know, scratched the surface in hearing about this evening. And we you know, for the sake of being able to conduct work, whittled that down for this second component. But I just can't say enough about how impressed I am about the people who are around that table, that we have a really great dedicated work group. And this is a community effort, and it's going to take our community to be able to move this forward. So it's exciting.
Thanks. I'll stop there and open it up for questions.
Thank you so much, very much for this. I think I'll kind of take notes so that we have the questions, and we'll just go around. Does anybody have any off the top of questions for? Yeah, go ahead, Karen.
Couple things that, well, before I came in, I'm the town council liaison to the community center committee. I serve and I'm the liaison to the community center advisory board.
Yeah.
And so, you know, as a town council, I personally feel like we feel like this is a crisis, but then we also have residents who are like, we want a community center and we want a pool.
Yeah.
And so I wonder, because Harriman doesn't do strategy, you know, they're not strategy. So I think one of the questions or one of the considerations that I put out there is, would you ever consider buying land that would have enough room for expansion of a community center or a pool? In that people would maybe support a school more if they knew that you were buying land that eventually we would have a community center on. I wonder if that would garner more support for the school. That was one of the questions or things I wanted to throw out there. And I told all my community center friends that I would bring that up tonight. And so here we are doing that. Just to comment, I'm curious, and you don't have to answer me, if any other schools in the nation have a structure where children at such a young age are switching schools every 2 years. I think some of the undertone that we heard was that may not be the best for kids' mental health, change. So that's just initial feedback with that. We've always heard that the land behind the middle school is it's wetlands, we can't use it. But I mean, for a cost, there's always land that you can fill. And so one of my questions is, you know, can we fill that junk wetland in? And yes, I'm calling it junk because it's really not serving much of a purpose, and then mediate somewhere else. And so I think that's another thing I'm putting out there where everyone's really focused on being on campus. And I feel like we've written off that land just because we've always been told it's just not viable. I've been told by other environmentalists that you can really do whatever you want. You just have to, in exchange, do something in exchange for it. So I think I'm wondering how much we'll explore that location as well. And then the only other one I had was, I don't know how serious the committee is in scouting donors. So, I mean, what was in the news in the last month is we have one of the wealthiest Americans living in our town.
Yes.
So I'm curious what we're going to be doing with that, if there's any ideas about that as well.
Yeah, so I'll address them without answering any of those, because I don't know the answers to any of them.
Oh, I just, those are my thoughts, and I don't expect answers if you
Yeah.
don't.
So, and Karen, I appreciate it, because these are all things that we talked about in phase one. We've had some side conversations in phase two already about some of these things, right? And so I'll tell you what we learned in phase one, and we'll look to the professionals to validate some of these, these things. But land for the community center, some of the challenges with land in Scarborough, and I'm sure you're aware of this. I didn't know this until I got into the committee. There's no infrastructure on the other side of where all of our open land is on the other side of I-95, where there's no underground water or like utilities, right?
And the
So
committee's very aware council does not want to put utilities over there, right?
I'm not aware of that, but I am now, at least you,
Yeah.
Councilwoman. And then we did talk a lot about the wetlands behind the middle school. That site came up over and over and over again. And I think it will take a conversation with the DEP. My understanding, what I was told in phase one, what we were told in phase one was that the DEP has said we've disturbed that wetland. The town has disturbed the wetland to the extent that it will allow, without creating a new wetland somewhere else. And so as we talk about cost, those are all things that we'll have to model into that if we decide to use that property. We did talk about phasing. I'm from away, right? As they say in Maine, I'm not a born and bred Mainer. And so the idea of a K-2 school was completely new to me. These small schools, everywhere that I've lived across the country in my life, schools were K-5. Elementary school was K-5, and then you had middle school, or K-6, and then middle school. So this is to me, it's unique in Maine. And so I certainly don't want to pass judgment on whether 2 years, because to me, it seems odd that we phase after second grade today. So to add a phasing cycle is something that I just think we need to look at. Let our educators who are professionals in this help us understand what those implications are for the kids. And so my answer to that is I don't know, but it's certainly a question that we've asked. Yeah. So
I was gonna say, Scarborough, I grew up here. Scarborough, I went to Acorn School, K-2. Then I went to Dunton School for 3rd and 4th grade. Then I went to 5th and 6th grade at the old, that was at one end.
Yeah.
You never saw anybody at the other end. Then I was at the other end for 7th and 8th grade. And then to the high school. So it wouldn't be completely
Yeah.
new to the town because we've already done it.
I moved every year in elementary school. My family just moved a lot, so I survived it. But again, I think I don't want to pass judgment one way or the other on that. I just think it's a question that we need to ask the professionals to help us understand.
Turned out.
Could I ask a quick follow-up to Karen's comment, so that we have the information for SBAC? What is the hesitancy to crossing 95 with utilities?
Well, that opens up the whole western Scarborough to development.
And it's
Like, and
It's
per
what-
our survey, residents want us to slow down development. So that's why I say that so strongly is the implications of bringing the utilities.
I'd like a turn lane on that side of the freeway.
I would say that's a strategic question that the town needs to really debate in terms of what we want to see in the RF district. That's something that we talked about recently, that we may need to do a comp plan for the whole RF side of town, because a lot of our comp plan today
Can you,
focuses more
I'm sorry,
the
can
comprehensive plan.
RF?
Sorry, the rural farming district. So that's basically everything on the other side of 95, where, it's designated RF, and we never really spent a lot of time envisioning that. And to Karen's point, one of the things we have to ask ourselves is what's the risk of adding public utilities and what that would do for sprawl and development out there, which is not something, at least today, we contemplate. And, you know, some of us are concerned that this would actually allow for that. And so that's just something that needs to be studied further. And I think at this point, it would be risky to put any infrastructure over there without some serious conversation. I have a couple of things like Karen, is that okay just to
Go ahead. Thank you.
share?
Yeah.
And I think some of this you guys are already doing, but first, thank you guys, thanks the committee for all the work, the staff. You know, I was on the first committee with the, when we did the consolidated school. Harriman was an awesome partner to work with then. I'm sure they're gonna be amazing to partner with again. Just a couple of things that I've been hearing from the public, and a lot of this came from our Counselor Corner Live that Shannon was at, but I just wanted to share, because I think these are just things that we heard that hopefully you guys will consider and do as you go forward. The first one was set a budget and stick with it. So that's not something we've done in the past historically. Usually we kind of talk about the programming, what we want, and that goes for the community center too. And then we end with a solution that's pretty big and can be somewhat shocking. And so what the public said to us was, we did a survey, we have a number, let's really try and use that number to guide the decision. You know, whatever that number is up to the committee to decide. We did some financial modeling when it was 100 million or so. And so we've already started to kind of look and contemplate what that means from a tax perspective. And so the more we have that and the more we can communicate that early, I think will just help the progress of the project. Did you have something to add to that?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, you know, and even in, you know, the 2 meetings that we've had as SBAC 2, I think one of the things that we talked about even on Monday evening, and I think, you know, Harriman was really clear in that, right? At SBAC 1, we kind of said that in terms of thinking about that tax impact and what people said that they could support. In the community survey, that was like a range of 70 to 130 million. But I think one of the things that really impressed the selection committee during the interview process, and then also the full committee on Monday evening, is that we heard multiple times in Harriman's proposal and their focus that they understand, you know, with a local project, that community number, and that really trying to stay within that $100 million mark.
Yeah.
And then figuring out from there, what are the priorities that we have as a community, knowing that perhaps we may not get to everything on the list, but, you know, can we address the major issues that we're trying to? And I think that was something that really stood out for members of the selection committee and the full committee on Monday evening, right? So that we're starting this approach in a very different place than the district chose to start in the last rendition of this, right? Because we're looking at 4 proposals that had broad community support from the 60 people that were part of that group, right? Like, we're basing our ideas from a grassroots level from members of the community who said, these are the things that are important to us. And we're also starting from a place of, here's how much money that we're looking to stay within.
Yeah, that's great. And I think it's great to continue that conversation. And I think your point about scope and priority also rang true. Again, the town does sometimes have a history of trying to solve a lot of problems when we do these capital projects.
Sure.
And so figuring out what is that primary problem we're trying to solve and trying to not get distracted. I love the idea of land for a community center, but I feel like that could be a distraction. And I would rather us get very focused on, if the problem is K-2 and enrollment of K-2, let's focus on that as the primary problem to solve. If there's other additional things that we would want to contemplate, that could be another ask on the ballot. That is this is the primary solution we want to solve, but hey, if you want to pay a little bit more for land, we can do that. If you want to fix the 6th grade, we can do that. But like, what is the primary problem and how do we make sure we stay in the budget? That was feedback that we got from during the Counselor Corner Live. The thing I'm interested to, and it's not probably in scope of the committee, but I think it's for the school and the board, is, you know, we missed the ball with the first ballot item when we put the consolidated school on. We know students are coming. What is that interim short-term plan that's gonna help us handle the capacity? I would like to see in the budget this year, something that shows us if there is any funding that needs to be coming in the next 5 years while the school's getting built, assuming it passes, or if it doesn't pass, that we have a plan. And also, like, what do you need the town to do? We've recently gotten some feedback on why aren't we slowing growth even further because of the issues with the school. Personally, I don't think we're at that point where we need to do that, but we may be at that point in a year and 2 years, and I think we need to figure out where we hit a critical point where we need to have that conversation of, do we need to put moratoriums on certain types of development that really tend to impact our school age children. So we know through the enrollment study, 3-bedroom apartments, single family homes have significant impact on school enrollment. So again, if the school doesn't pass, I think we need to run some of these war game scenarios to better understand what you need from the town, not just what the school needs to do, but what do you need from us to help in a parallel path.
Yeah, and can I speak to that really quick? We did a short-term goal setting, because Mitchell wasn't yet on the board. We're going to do another one in June to align with the school year, but one of the things we did discuss was really developing what our short-term solutions are going to look like and really starting to put those in the budget, so that we are prepared. So the community knows, we know, everybody knows what that is going to look like. The one thing that it's a balancing game. The one thing we do have to wait on is what is the solution going to be? What is the proposed, right? And so once you know that, then you can back and do what is the short term.
Right, right. Shannon and I had kind of discussed this, right?
Mhm.
Because it is one of the goals of the board. And what I suggested was we really have to figure out where we're landing. Like, so, if you look at that last slide where it's like, okay, when we land on a solution, then I think is the time for us to figure out how to address that gap between, this is the solution that we know that we're going to be working towards. It's going to happen on X year or X date. And what's that gap that we're looking for? Because what we also have to do is we want to keep going back, excuse me, to our enrollment projections and the ongoing data that we continue to collect about birth rates in Scarborough, so that we're not being alarmist, but we are also planning appropriately for that gap time.
That's great. The other thing, it's great to hear about communications, because I know that was a challenge last time. I think it's super important that we really figure out how we communicate to different demographics in town. We were at the SEDCO meeting and we were learning about all the changes in demographics in Scarborough, and our aging population is growing. There's less people with kids in schools, and they're all voters and have to support this. And I think a lot of our communication last time went through a lot of school channels that hit the families that had kids in schools. And so how do we broaden that engagement and reach with different members of the community that may not be as connected to the school? Because I think that's critical, and that's just something from last time I think we could have done more of, but it's really hard. So I'm interested to see if Harriman has a plan there, how we do that.
And I can jump in with a little bit of update on that.
We didn't plan
too.
this, by the way.
Right. Like, I feel like I've been like really, dedicating a large portion of my time as of late to this work. And so I want to share that information with you. Just today, we had a meeting with our webmaster and some key members of our previous communications committee. So 3 members of SBAC. To start talking about revamping our website. We, have received a lot of critical feedback about how difficult it is, even though everything is there. You really have to know how to navigate to find everything. And so, looking at, another local district who's going through similar work. Again, we've had some strong advocates within our SBAC team.
Mhm.
So we started that conversation today, even though we don't yet have Harriman as partners. And so we did that and we're like really excited to have Emily, who is the communications, consultant from Harriman, join us in the future. But we've already talked about, our webmaster is doing a mock-up of a new page for us that we hope to be able to have go live during the week of December 9th. We also talked today about having a subscribe to this page, setting it up kind of blog style so that here's like the latest news, like, November 2024, here's the blog post, here are the key presentations, right next to it in visual format so that no one has to navigate beyond that. And that subscribe to feature would be incredible, right? Because any member of the community could subscribe to the page. And then any time that we post something to that page, that feed will drop in to those community members' emails. So, I was really excited about that. We are literally just hitting the ground on this project and we're working really diligently to make sure that we're getting the right start on the work.
Great. One thing I would suggest, when you guys are ready, is to engage with Nick Cloutier, who is now our guy who does a lot of special stuff.
Special portions, I'm not
sure Yeah.
what is.
Special
project?
He led our revaluation, and he recently just published, it's on the town website, we should send it to them, the after action report on communications. Because it really was, in my opinion, a best practice of how to engage with the public to bring them along in a very complex process. And so it's definitely focused on revals, but I think he did a lot of good things, now has a lot of connections that I think
Right.
can be leveraged.
That's a great
And
idea.
Allison as well, which
Yes.
is phenomenal. So
Allison's
making-
already reached out to me, right, because we're gonna
And I,
push out a communication tomorrow
Mhm.
with the information from this evening. And then if, after the board votes this evening, if that's a successful vote, which, that is my hope, that will push that information out to the community as well.
And then I don't think it can be undersold that the committee makeup of the SBAC two is just because John and I both worked really hard on the consolidated school referendum. And we were down to like a skeleton crew by the
Yeah.
end. I mean, we all acknowledge, we just did not have enough manpower. And the makeup and the demographics of the new committee, given that we started with 60 and now we're down to 20, but we engaged such a different portion of our population. Not everyone in the room has kids, not everyone in the room, has lived here forever, and so we just pulled from all these different places in Scarborough, and I think that lays a really good foundation for setting us up differently this time.
And I just want to add that we're not down to 20. It's
Oh,
not
yeah.
that 40
No.
people walked away,
No,
right? It
no.
was a reconstitution.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it actually is our hope that we're going to be able to go back as, subcommittee work needs to happen and re-engage some of
that
those
committee,
people,
yeah.
because I know that we have just so much dedication and
Yeah.
interest from those people that work with us.
So I'm a project manager by profession, and so when I look at plans, I'm like, oh my gosh, what are the things that could delay us? And the thing that gave me pause most when I saw this, and it's coming from my experience last time, is the site selection. You knew it.
I did.
Fine. Because that was the long tail, and I know we have to know a solution to know what we need in terms of acreage. I hope that we prioritize the site selection process soon to get going, at least to just know what's out there. And again, that's gonna be a challenge because one, from what I recall from that, even though I think last time we were looking for 20 or 30 acres, which is a pretty big ask. I don't know if this will be 10, 15, which might be more feasible, but land is gonna be a challenge. And at least last time we said we can't go to ballot without land or knowing land. And I personally have a lot of wounds from that process because the land piece was very challenging. And I know that from personal experience. So I don't know how we take a step back, reflect on that, and really make sure we do things differently from those lessons learned, because it really was hard and ended up delaying things, I think, a lot of times. So that's just something
That did
Worried
come up
about
on Monday.
Yeah.
I think Larry.
Yeah,
you
it
wanna speak
did,
to
and
that?
one of the changes that we discussed directly with Harriman was that we needed to do the site selection in parallel as we tried to solve the option, what's the option? Which is difficult, right? Because one of those schools might only need 10 acres, and
Mhm.
so, but the early work would be kind of a real blanket identification of every possible site. And then as we narrow down the choice for which option we're gonna pursue, would fine tune that site, that,
Mhm.
you know, what are the
Yeah. But-
likely sites
Yeah.
that fit that profile.
But to Karen's point, like if we end up finding a parcel of land that is bigger than what we actually need, that becomes an opportunity in the future, that's not a bad thing. It's just,
Well, and it was
Yeah.
more of a strategy.
yeah,
I mean, maybe people don't want to vote for a school, but they might vote for it because you're gonna put a pool in someday,
yeah, someday.
someday.
And then my last thing, and it's more an ask for the council, and again, this has also been coming from the public, and I even heard it today when I was talking to somebody. You know, sometimes people are deciding what they vote on based on other things that they know are coming to a point, and they may withhold a vote on something, knowing something else is coming. I think we have to, you know, make a commitment and resolution at least on how we are committed to this project as our top priority, which I at least heard people say during candidates night. I've heard sitting counselors say that, so I think it's time to really commit to that, and make sure that we're clear that this is the top priority, but what does that mean for the other capital projects that we also know are in the pipeline? Is that, you know, we're going to like pencil them in for the last year in our CIP to like say we're just punting those for now until this gets solved and we're not going to commit to anything too soon. I think we have to figure out like, if this is the priority, what does that mean for the other project? And really commit to that publicly, so that way the public knows when they show up at the polls when this comes, that, you know, how they should be thinking about other big projects as well. And again,
Go out on a limb and say you're not gonna get a whole lot of objection from the SBAC or the school
Yeah.
board
No.
that the town
No.
council would resolve to prioritize this
No.
project.
but going like, not just saying it, but like going on the record and
Yeah.
actually like committing to
Yeah,
it.
and that was loud and clear at Council Corner Live.
So if I may, just one, from the committee's perspective, we had a lot of people stand up in phase one and go, oh, there's an ad hoc, you know, people didn't even know there was a community center committee, and they're looking at the same pieces of land we're looking at, and there was, and so, you know, one of the things that we suggested is if that committee's still working, and I'm not sure if you guys still are or not, but you know, because there is things like, you know, when the leader runs an ad, you know, runs an article and shows you know, a site layout with a community center at a piece of land that people thought was going to be a school, it creates a lot of energy in the community. And so having joint communications come from the town to help people understand that just while this is the school is the priority, there are other projects that can't just sit idle, right? We have to do some work to look into this. And that doesn't mean that we're not looking at the school, but clearly communicated to the community what the priorities are, and that, you know, that things get worked in parallel, but the phasing of those might come out in a certain order. I'm not sure that that's clear for the community.
It's not.
And so your point's well taken.
Mhm.
As that work continues, we just have to make sure that they know that.
Mhm.
I mean, having recently been on the campaign trail, so to speak, I could say, at least from my experience, that among many in the community, there is this sense of what I would call sort of where does it end? We heard it last night at our council meeting on one of the topics. In the sense that things just keep sort of popping up. And now, you know, the school referendum failed, and now they're just going to go back and run it back again. So obviously, there are a lot of things that sort of relate to some of the communication considerations that have been discussed. But I do agree with the notion of being very clear that this is the top priority, and that there's some kind of pecking order and some longer term sort of strategy for how the town's going to tackle these things. So it doesn't feel to some in the community like we're just sort of being reactive, and you know, that it's all sort of unpredictable.
Yeah, go ahead.
You know, as I'm listening, it seems to me that what I hear is you've got a lot of communication medium And what I haven't heard and what I hope you've thought about is what's the message? What are the one or two or three things that we want the community to understand about this project as we go along? Because I think it will be critical in one, alleviating ambiguity, and two, creating real clarity. And in my short exposure to this project has tremendous strengths. And one message is that this really has been from the bottom up community. You've got 60 faces that you could put in the leader, one after another, or a full page of them as a method of getting across that kind of message. So I'm not going to suggest what your messaging should be, but I think that my recommendation would be really spend some careful time thinking about, at the end of all of this, what do we want people to understand, to feel, to know? Because I think what I see with a lot of stuff is that what we're trying to do is get it through the voters, get a check mark in the box, as opposed to generating some real enthusiasm for something that we can all be proud of. That's a messaging strategy. And so, again, there are others, my colleagues, who are way smarter than I am on the issues of policy and practicality and picking land. My focus tends to be on making sure there is a message and that people get it. That will get the votes.
I'll just offer two things. The first, and I don't know if you can speak to this, Mark, but one of the things I would really like to see the committee do is, as you're vetting the four potential solutions right now, is a real hard deep dive into them. What is the pros and cons of each solution, and what are we gaining for the community? What are we potentially giving up because it isn't going to fit? And what does that mean cost wise? What does that mean student focus wise, education wise? What are the gives and what are the gets that we're getting? And then the other thing that I actually heard a lot in Fate when we went to referendum that was interesting, and I think I fell into this quite a bit. We would talk with community members, and we would talk about what we were voting on, and somebody would ask questions like, well, can't you just add on to the current schools? And I personally was very quick to say, no, we can't, right? But the reality is you can, it's just cost prohibitive, right? And so when we talk about messaging, when we talk about making sure we're clear, we're talking about making sure that the community knows factual information, it's really important that we're mindful of how we speak, like all of us, right, at this table, that we're all using the same language, we're all using, not that no, we can't, but it might be that we could, however, here's why we didn't go this way, right? We just have to, I think we all have to, just something to think about for all of us.
Yeah, I think, thanks, Shannon. I think that, one of the first things that we have to do is prioritize the priorities, right? None of the four solutions are perfect. They all have flaws. And so what are the priorities of this project? What are the things that we must do? What are the things that we'd like to do? And what are the nice to haves? So that we can give our consultants, that guidance to make sure that we design a solution and we come to the thing that meets the most of what we want, because we're not going to get everything. And so I think getting that guidance from these bodies, right, and from the community early in the process will help us with that. We all, I think the phase one was a good representation of all parts of the community and lots of different ideas and lots of different priorities. Everybody wants something different out of this. I'd love to have a pool added to the schools. That'd be 100%. I hate going to Cape Elizabeth to swim. But where does that rank against all the other priorities? And so I think the sooner we can get that together, the sooner we can get to work on narrowing down the right options.
I also do think it is imperative that we are not short-sighted in our solution and are very upfront with, I think my fear is that, trying to pass a school budget and having someone look at me and say, you never told me if we decided on 4 schools that we'd be stretching our resources thin and now we have to hire more. Or saying, you know, you didn't tell me if we built only 1 school, this was gonna happen. I want to make sure that the community is really understanding the long-term, not the one time, we gotta pass 1 referendum and move that forward. We will every year have to pass a school budget in order to help our kids year to year. So I really want the community to understand. I think we have 4 wonderful options in front, and I think it's gonna be really interesting to see where our prioritizing priorities lands. But I do want to make sure that the public is very aware going into these solutions. These are long-term decisions. I don't think anyone wants to build a new school in 5 years. We're hopeful this is a good solution that will land for a long time, but seeing the implications of that. Yes.
Bill Donovan. Until 2 weeks ago, I was closely associated with the library here in town, president for the last 5 years. And kind of live and breathe the library and always will. But we learned from our experience. We put forth a proposal that tried to address all of the problems that the library observed it had. And we're in the planning process now to move on with that knowledge. I would say that coordinating between school, town council, and the library for these 3 major projects is critical. The roundtable we had recently, it was virtually unanimous, I think, that the school was the #1 priority. I felt that all along, whether I was rooting for my own Scarborough Public Library or not. It's the cornerstone, one of the true cornerstones of our country. I do think that perfect will get in the way of a good solution that will pass. Because if you try to solve all of the problems, yeah, I think we're doomed to repeating the consequences that both the school and the library have experienced. And that's our plan, is and we are in that planning process. And we are looking at how we can move forward because we plan to coordinate our efforts with the town's efforts, community center, school, so that we're behind you 100%. And that's, I think, where the library wants to be in this, and will be successful in its own right, but at the same time, help the school to achieve its best results as our #1 community priority.
Quick question I have when we think about, and a lot of this conversation has been about messaging reasons. Curious, knowing that we've had some neighboring communities, including Cape Elizabeth, struggle to get schools funded. The extent to which the committee and everyone who's been involved has sort of looked at that and tried to take some lessons from that. Obviously, there's some different circumstances, but I'm acutely aware that, we're all, there are immediate neighbors, and I'm sure that there are those in the community who look around and see, well, other towns are voting these things down. And here comes Scarborough again with something else. So I wondered the extent to which that's been factored in.
Yeah, so personally, I didn't follow the Cape process as closely as others, but I know, there's members in the room. Sue has kept us abreast at almost every meeting of what's been going on there. And obviously, if we go forward with Harriman was involved in that. And so I think understanding, and we did talk a little bit on Monday about some of those shortcomings and how, we had a table up at the exit polls, and one of the observers came by, and he's from Cape, and just talked about his personal involvement in their process and all of the issues that they had. And, you know, it was very emotional for him. And so, you know, I just kind of listened and tried to take notes, but I think there's a lot of key takeaways from that. In addition to, you know, what we've gone through in the last couple of years, you know, I mean, I think I won't speak for the town. I'll just speak for myself. I didn't know that this has been an ongoing problem for, you know, a project for almost 10 years, right? We've gone through this over and over and over again, and it's still here, right? And so, you know, I'm happy to be involved with it now, and you know, as has been said, right, the goal is to get something through that will give us a long-term solution that's going to be the best thing for the community. And I think as long as we keep that in front of us as our North Star, we'll get to the finish line.
Yeah. One thing I observed with the Cape situation was a really poor dynamic between the board and the council. So before we leave here, we're all gonna put our hands in the middle and yeah. But joking aside, like seriously, we need to be transparent, be honest with each other. I'm not saying we always have to agree, but to your point, the process of the citizens driving this has to be the focus, and it has to be citizen driven. And we're just here to figure out, how do we help you? How do we
Right.
make it successful? What I think personally about the solution, I can vote at the polls about, but what I want to make sure is that the process is a good process, that it's driven by the residents that are volunteering a lot of their time to make it happen. And so that's what I'm committing. We all put our hands in and raise is to
absolutely.
really hopefully support the residents working through this and committing to get us something that we can bring to residents for a vote.
I think an add-on to that is that, and everybody's touched on it a couple of different ways, but there's originally, 50, 60 people and now 20, but those, like your idea of like highlighting those people and all, even without that, those people are already ambassadors for
Yes,
this whole
right.
project that didn't exist on the
Absolutely.
first time. around. So it's the start of a much bigger network, I think.
Well, first, I'm gonna shamelessly plug, I hope you all stay, because tonight is my favorite night of all of our meetings. So there's a bunch of kids out here. It is our fall sports recognition. So I would love for you all to stay, and it happens early in the agenda, and it's a really awesome thing to watch. So I would love for you to stay. Thank you so much, Charlie and Larry, for your leadership, and
Thank
thank
you.
you to those that came from the building committee. This has been really, you really are, I know Diane's told you, but you have been a wonderful hard workers, and I'm really excited to see where this goes forward. So thank you.
Again,
Yes,
Yeah, ready?
okay.
Go.
Team. With no objection, we were going to